Every once in a while, and mostly, or most of the time, I think Grantley has been sitting in this chair when we do an interview of some kind or a town hall meeting. But this Sunday, I have the privilege to sit here. I wanted to say we oftentimes give opportunity for people to share what's going on in their lives. We've had several people, and it's been sometimes part of the plan for the service, and sometimes it wasn't, we joke with this, but it wasn't on the green card. And people come up and share what's going on in their lives. Historically, we've had, when Grantley was here, he interviewed, this is going a long ways back, but some of you remember Fiona Mutesi, the Queen of Katwe, the chess player, and that was a great service. We had also Teotha Denard, a local actor, and I thought that was a terrific service too. And then a while back, Jerry Chapman and Charlotte Williams Jerry's from the Stalo Indian Nation, and Charlotte is from the Muckleshoot Indian Nation, and shared with us. So today, though, it's kind of just family. It's and I still think this can be a really, really special time. And it kind of emanated from an idea that I've been working on, some with Russell and some other folks here in the church, Rick Rosenkrantz, on the idea of a homecoming. Now, homecoming, if you take that to an American context, that usually means you got to get a tux and you ask a girl or something, and you're gonna show up at a dance. But this is a different thing. So we were going to do back-to-back Sundays, a homecoming part 1 and a homecoming part 2. The homecoming part 2 is going to be actually next month, and it's going to be kind of a short drama musical program that I think you're going to really enjoy. This Sunday, though, it's kind of rubber meets the road kind of idea. And I may be stretching that phrase a little bit by calling it a homecoming, but this is going to be then homecoming part 1. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, I think. John 10:10 identifies 3 reasons that the enemy has come to our world: to steal, kill, and destroy. And you've also heard me say at least a few times, and I'm sure this wasn't just my ideas, but I mentioned a couple weeks ago too, I think, that pastors like to do things, 3 points that all start with the same letter. That's what we do. So mine was distort. So the way he steals, kills, and destroys is distort, distract, and disconnect. Okay? And so when we land on that last one of disconnect, I think it relates to everything. In fact, I think I was talking with Karen one time, and this came out that now I'm going to mess it up, but the opposite of, I'm going to have to come back to that because I didn't write it down. But connection is the antithesis of addiction. Okay? Addiction happens a lot of times in lonely places, in other words. And connection is what takes it. So if the enemy uses disconnect, it's for those purposes. And it's disconnect between people in church. It's disconnect between individuals and God. It's disconnect between a husband and a wife. It's disconnect between parents and kids. Anytime he can achieve disconnect, that's right in step with what he's trying to do. We make bad choices when we're disconnected. So today, we have a mom and a son with us. Why don't you welcome these 2 folks, and then I'm going to... You recognize Karen. TR is maybe grown up since you saw him last. or he visits every once in a while. But why don't you, just for the purposes of folks too online and stuff, and we'll start with you, to my immediate right. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us just a bit about your family and, yeah.
I'm Karen. My family and I have gone to this church since we moved here in 1992, so it really is our home. I come from a family of 4 brothers and a sister, big family. And yeah, this church has just really been a part of our life for a long, long time.
And
So.
your immediate family, one right next to you,
Yes,
but also?
I am married, and Terry's out there, 44 years, and we have a daughter who also lives in the area.
44 years, that's worth something, maybe. Okay, and you have a daughter, and I cut you off, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I have a daughter. So,
and her name is?
Her name is Amy.
Oh.
She also grew up in this church and lives in the area, so.
And this young man next to you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm TR. Currently, we live over in Nampa, me and my wife and my 2 sons, and our dog, Penny.
Yeah, you can do that. And as I said, they have a story to share with us that is probably not completely unlike some of the stories that are a part of your family, but in this idea and theme that I kind of already shared, it kind of has a circle to it in some capacity. And while you might not say this is identical, I think through time you'll kind of see why I wanted them to share. But you might say, well, that's not identical to anything that I've experienced. That doesn't mean you can't identify with some things, ideas and thoughts that you'll hear come from the 2 of them. So with that in mind, and that whole distract, distort, disconnect idea, Karen, can you kind of lead us into the story that we're moving into with, using that kind of as a bridge, maybe?
Yeah, Ev and I were talking about this this week, and we've had multiple conversations between the 3 of us. And one of the nice things that TR said in that process of our discussions was that he never felt disconnected from me or from Terry or from our family. And I thought, that's a huge compliment.
Yes.
We did feel distance, but not disconnect. In the story is really one about addiction and anxiety. In talking about my family, I think my family of origin is very much genetically loaded for anxiety and addiction. And so that's kind of how the story, want to kind of tell how that journey from a mom perspective and TR's perspective, and hopefully in a way that helps somebody else with their story.
So I think maybe then I can add, that's still a D word, so I can add that now, and so distance can come out to disconnect.
Yes.
So TR, how would you kind of, if you're comfortable with it, and by the way, if you know these people very well, and some of you do, but maybe a lot of you don't, this is not their typical thing to say, hey, let me be up front.
No.
And graciously, they said that they would kind of share some of this, and I just want to say thank you for that publicly again. But could you maybe get a little bit more specific about that distance stuff, and what was maybe the crux of that, TR?
Well, I think I'll start off with saying the distance, I mean, it starts with the drugs and the alcohol, and now that we're here, I'll preface that now I have 11 years of clean and sobriety.
Yay. Outstanding.
But yeah, as growing up, there was a lot of anxiety and bouts of depression and just figuring out how to weave in and out of that, finding acceptance in spots that you probably shouldn't look for it and finding it. So that definitely started to create the distance and some disconnect, but not beyond repair.
So I'm going to stay with you for a second, TR. So how old were you when you really felt like, if you were going to point to and say, this is how old I was when it really began to kind of be you mentioned drugs and alcohol, but where it really began to get a hold?
I would say it probably started in junior high.
Okay. And do you remember like a specific time that the anxiety and, or however you want to phrase it, kind of connected you to that? Was there just a moment in time as you look back and you could say, man, maybe this idea will help, that if I could have skipped over that, I might have not gone that way, but this is what happened, and,
As I look back on it, I don't believe there was any, traumatic moment where it's like, oh, now
Okay.
it's there. It was kind of just there, and then as it progressed, it got more amplified through the years.
So, as a mom, then, Karen, was there a moment in time that you realized that there's something going on in TR's life that that's going to need attention, and I'm not sure, where I go from here?
Yeah, I think there certainly were struggles in grade school, but again, junior high was really when it showed up in a bigger way. And so by nature, I like to solve problems.
Okay.
Let's figure this out. Let's fix it. And so we certainly got some more professional help and different things at that point. So it kind of in that junior high, and I'm sure moms can relate to this, like those moments when you feel there's always that anticipation of, oh, when is the phone call coming today? When is the problem going to present itself today? And, kind of living with that, my own anxiety that kind of fueled trying to fix things. So
There's a lot of us out here. I'm of Tustin, and I want to fix things. There's a lot of people who I think can relate to that.
Yeah.
And so you could see these things developing, but was there, can you give us like one example where you kind of said, okay, that tells me that this, was there some hidden things that kind of you became aware of maybe?
I just think in those junior high moments when, there was issues at school and parent conferences at school and those kinds of things when, you just knew if that's going on in junior high, where are we headed? Okay. We're not headed in a good direction.
Okay.
So kind of started with that. So, we tried, one of the things we tried was changing school, which really helped for quite a while because there was better environment and better peer support, but
okay.
Yeah.
Did your TR, back to you, this isn't on our script, but I just wanted to, I've gone over, we have 6 questions, but I went over these with them before, but and if I ask you anything that you kind of say, let's go to the next question, that'll be fine. But were there some moments then, TR, that you were trying to keep some things hidden? Anything in particular, like a moment that you kind of go, and then oops, they kind of discovered something?
I think in the junior high period, there wasn't anything in particular that I was hiding yet.
Okay.
I hadn't really started down the path that I went down. It was mostly just like I couldn't figure out what was going on. Why am I so anxious? Why is stuff like this? And how do we get around this? So that was mostly what was going on in that moment.
Okay.
The hiding came later.
The hiding came later. Okay. And that kind of brings us to the next question is, as you're kind of processing the struggles that you're seeing him sort through, was there a moment that you would say this was the peak moment when I went, as I look back even, this was the most difficult moment? Karen.
I'll let TR talk about that a bit too, but I do remember as a mom, and maybe you can relate, those moments when in your gut you're like, bad things are going on, and I maybe don't see them, I don't see evidence of them, but bad things are going on, and just that worry and anxiety that goes on. So you could say more about.
Do you look back and say, well, this was the most difficult time, maybe the most difficult time for you to share with your family or something in that vein?
I probably, the most difficult time was at the end of the period of just coming to them and being like, hey, I need help.
Okay.
Like, I'm not going to make it if I keep going down this path. It's going to lead to living somewhere I don't want to live for the rest of my life, or I'm not going to be living anymore.
And so, how old were you then?
It was like 25, 26 at that point.
Okay. So throughout then, from junior high to 25, 26, was it kind of just a steady increase, or were there kind of these kind of things, or what happened there?
There was definitely peaks and valleys going through the whole thing. I think after high school we hit, I feel like it was a peak, just new friends, doing new things, the acceptance of it all, and you're having that, just having that high and just of being connected, and then just feeling that connection.
So that's interesting, because you've taken the connection or disconnection part into a whole different thing. So there was distance maybe in the family, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're nodding. If I get to a place that you're not ready to nod, just cut me off. But so there was distance growing there, but you were finding connection elsewhere. And what was the bridge kind of for that connection with these other folks? You used the word accepted.
Yeah, I think just finding a new friend group and being pulled in and being accepted for who you are and what you want to do, and just going about life and having fun. And
so let's hone in on that for a second. So this new group that you found acceptance with, I'm not asking for names, but in general, if you were to describe that group, what was their life mantra, so to speak?
I would say it was partying.
Okay. And so within that, you could be a part if you were participating.
Yep.
Okay. So let's step into that time. So you can feel it kind of moving. You can feel the distancing happening. And as a mom, I think a lot of moms have radar, and it comes out with, you're hanging out with the wrong people. Is that fair at that point? Were you kind of aware of that, or?
Yeah, I certainly was aware that those friends were not a good influence.
Weren't helping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But, as you're saying, if you're 18, 19, 20 years old, your power, your influence is not big.
Okay.
You can't control that. I mean, you can control yourself, you can pray, but you can't stop an adult's behavior.
Okay. That's a hard thing for a lot of us to hear. You can pray, but you can't make something stop at that point. How did that impact your feelings toward each other? Let's go back to TR again. So you're in the middle of that, those years, 25 or whatever, wherever you felt like that began to 26. How did your connection then to this other group and your distance then from mom and dad, and I'm guessing Amy too, did that impact how you felt toward them at all?
I don't think it changed how I felt towards my family. I know, sorry, I knew I was always welcome, and there was always love, and we still had interactions, and
Okay.
we're still there for each other.
Did you feel like, and just real straight, did you feel like they couldn't know all of who you were, though, at that point?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
I think there was there grew to be a genuine, on my part, and I think Terry's part, just a genuine lack of trust. Like, he could say whatever he wanted to say. We're like, well, I don't know if that's true or if that's not true. There's been enough untruth that we just don't know.
Okay. Okay. Were you aware that they had come to that place, TR, that there were some things that you would say to them, but you knew they weren't going to buy it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You can only blow so much smoke before
Okay, you can
know
only-
there's no fire.
What's that? Say
You
that
can
again.
only blow so much smoke before you know there's no fire.
Okay, okay. So, so in those moments, in order for you to still have communication, right? Because you're still talking, did that change a level or a depth of your communication? I'll start with Karen here, just to avoid tension at different times.
I would say that's true. I mean, if you know TR, you know he's not particularly verbal.
Okay.
It's not his way to communicate. So conversation in general is not a high volume. Communicating, he and I have always been able to have some conversations that got pretty in depth, but there wasn't a lot of those. And as a mom, you kind of choose your moments when you think something might be heard that you want to say. And I don't know for that part of the story yet, but it was certainly, as he was saying, is he got to a point where he was at the end of himself. I just said to him one day, because I had been looking, I said, there's this thing called Celebrate Recovery. There's actually a great Celebrate Recovery group over in Federal Way. You might think about that. So,
Okay.
we would have those kind of conversations, but always try to not be, you can't, as we've talked about, you can't tell people what to do, and you have to assume, or I did assume, and God helped me assume, he is smart enough, and he is capable, and God loves him more than I do. He has the ability to figure this out and choose differently.
Wait,
and he's
God
choosing.
loves him more than you do?
He does.
Did everybody
Thank
catch
goodness.
that? That's a huge thing to remember in this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise we're tempted to think that we have to be the answer.
Yes, that we're the Savior. We're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. So since she already introduced that, well, let me ask you one more thing, TR, before we get there. How did it feel when you were away from those that were kind of your new circle of connection, and you were also away from your family, so you're just by yourself, and you had to deal with just you, what were your thoughts in respect to some of the things that you mentioned that you were hiding? How did that feel? How did that wear?
It wore very hard. The constant of bringing you down and just like, oh, why are you doing this? Why did you do this? Why you have this? Where are you going? What are you doing? Kind of just the constant weight and burden of that on your shoulders.
And so self-esteem at those moments, where are you at?
I would say very low for sure. Because the way I am, like my mom said, I'm not very communicated oriented, so I often seek to be by myself. So when you can't sit by yourself because of your thoughts, then you're just like, what do I do now?
Wow. So let's turn the page and talk about kind of the beginning. Your mom already introduced, she introduced an idea of Celebrate Recovery. did you kind of have to build yourself up to that, to offering that, or was it just kind of?
It wasn't a hard thing for me to offer. I didn't know where it would land with TR, but I offered it.
So it's kind of like, here's this.
Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't talked especially about this, but I one of the questions I know is like, so where was God in this? And for myself, I was doing part of Bible Study Fellowship, and at one point we were, studying Abraham and Isaac, and God really used that story in my life to say, God provided for Abraham and Isaac a sacrifice. And so sometimes you really hear God say things to you almost out loud.
Wow.
And it was like, Karen, take your hands off of this.
Wow.
So there really was that kind of step back. You can introduce ideas, you can be helpful, but you are not the savior here.
Thank you. That was terrific. TR, so as Mom is hearing these things that she's expressed from Jesus, what's happening in you? What are you hearing from him? And you can connect it if you want, even to, so she lays out this idea of celebrate recovery. I mean, I believe that God is always speaking to all of us. I don't think that the problem is ever that he's not speaking, it's that we're not listening. And I think that to be true with unsaved people. God is always speaking, and he uses methods and stuff. So in the middle of this, Mom comes and says, here, what about this? What are you hearing from him? And how did that moment resonate for you?
I think in that moment, like you said, I believe he probably was speaking. I wasn't listening. I think for a long time I just tried to keep him at arm's reach. Just like, I'll figure it out. I don't need this. I don't need you. It's constant. Yeah, so at that point I was mostly like, I'll go, I'll check it out because she wants me to. It'll buy me more time kind of thing.
Okay, so it's kind of a negotiation. Yeah. Okay, this will make Mom feel a little bit better. Yeah. Okay.
It's hysterical.
Yeah, okay.
now it's
hysterical.
Yeah.
At the time. But really, I don't think you would have cared, just that he was going to go, right?
I was happy that he was going to go, and it actually was the coolest thing because knowing him, I'm like, okay, you might tell me that you're going to go, but I know that you would get to the door, you would even want to go, but you might not even go into the building
okay.
because of anxiety. So I said, well, what do you think about if I go with you the first time that you go? He's like, okay. Yeah.
And you were okay with that?
Well, he was like, okay, then I really have to go. But so we really did go, and sat through the first one, and then the next week I'm like, I was kind of like, well, do you want me to go? Do you want me to not go? And he's like, I got this, and so. You can say more about how it went from there.
So, okay. So first time you were like, okay, she comes. Second time you went by yourself. So at that meeting then, perhaps, and I should probably say, how would you describe the Celebrate? For some people know, how many people know when I say Celebrate Recovery, you have an idea of what we're talking about, okay? A lot, but not everybody. So the Celebrate Recovery program, TR, tell us, how would you describe it in a sentence or two?
I think it starts off like we're all in the sanctuary. There's some worship music, and then they have a message, and then it breaks off into separate groups, whether it's drugs and alcohol and all the other addictions. Everybody kind of goes off into their own groups to have.
It's pastoral. Hurts, habits, and hang-ups, right?
Yep.
And so if you identify with any of those things, you're welcome. So now you get there the first time, and can you describe what clicked?
I think for the most part, there was just, as you walk through that door, there's just overwhelming amounts of compassion and just authenticity. Like, these are real people. These are people just like me going through the same thing. I think sitting in the first meeting and this, like, I didn't speak, I let it go past me, but just listening to everybody, all the other men tell their story and where they're at in their life is like, this is where I'm at, and this is where I want to be. And it seems like if I come here and listen to these guys, this is how I'm going to get there.
So it's an acceptance again, but with a completely different context. That's good.
Genuine connection.
Okay, okay. So was that first time there, or was it later? If you were going to say this was the turning point moment, was that it, the first time there, or was it kind of still, you kind of got a foot in Egypt and a foot in Israel?
I want to say that it was pretty, we started and then it started.
Okay, okay. Did you feel like God was speaking to you in a deep part of your life in some capacity, or was that really recognizable, or something that, how was that happening?
Yeah, I definitely feel once I walked through those doors, my arm came back and he drew close.
Wow.
And we started to mend the fences.
Did you just say your heart came back?
No, my arm came back to me so he could come close to me.
Okay.
And then we started to mend the fences.
So did you run out and tell your mom right away?
I don't think I did.
No.
No.
I was just waiting for the evidence,
Okay.
the going every week, the changes in behaviors,
And did you start to see those things?
Yeah, sure did.
Can you describe like a moment where you went, the mom and you went, it's getting better?
It was, on a day-to-day basis, it was never terrible, but you could just see the change in the direction of his life and that he was going in a productive, God-oriented direction. You could see the turn.
Okay.
So takes a while for results to follow all that.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah.
All right. So I'm gonna kind of turn and I know this is just such a quick overview, and there's a lot of things that first of all, if people wanted to, could they talk to you guys about some of these things? And okay. And as I said, I don't think anybody here, because we're all made differently. I think that if I can just interject an idea too, is that so each of us has different, in essence, purpose and place in this world that God has designed for us to be a part. And the enemy also understands every point of entry that we're most fallible. Excuse me, I believe that. And he knows us so well, just because he follows us around. And he picks up on places that we are looking for acceptance from, and places that we have anxiety in. He's great at seeing those things. So even if you if you say, I am not in an identical situation, but like I said, just coming all the way back, but I can identify. They've both said that they'd be willing to talk with you about that if there's someone that feels like that might be a help. So to just kind of tie things together here as we wrap up in just a few minutes, if you were going to say, and you can take as much time as you want to with this is our last question, but if you were going to say anything to somebody who, like I said, does identify in some capacity as a mom, and and after she's finished in UTR, what would you say as some encouragement to them today?
I would say that I wished that I had maybe been more vulnerable about what all was going on with people at church. I certainly had a great group of friends that I was able to really share with, and I would certainly recommend. One of the things that was so helpful to me was to have a friend that was about 10 years older than me, and not that she'd had addiction that she dealt with, or with her kids, but other things. Just to have somebody that's older than you kind of calm you down, walk you through this, be there, call you every week, kind of a thing. But I didn't so much share as much at church. I think sometimes at church we think we have to be this kind of all-together family when we're not quite so pretty on the inside. I just think too, you got to. I'm thinking about it. God really answered so many prayers for us and He provided great people to step into TR's life. Before the Celebrate Recovery, he had multiple people, Ron Zimmer, Rex Parrott, various really great men that stepped into his life and helped get to that point. And Kylie eventually, he's brought great people. And that's I believe from prayers. And I'm always grateful that Terry's parents prayed for us every day, and my parents prayed for us every day. So I don't know how you get through things without people really praying for you.
Wow, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Does it ever hurt you to hear somebody say to you, I've been praying for you every day? So do that for some folks that you know, and whether they ask you or not, to do that for them, right? But
they did not know all the story,
right.
But they were praying.
Right. So TR, you could kind of go on both sides of this. Maybe you could say, if you're a young person who has been working through some of the things that you described, what kind of input would you give to them? And then maybe you could also say, if you're a parent or a loved one who's walking with somebody, some words of encouragement for that too.
I definitely say for the sons and daughters out there, it's hard because you want your own identity and you want to do things yourself, but try your hardest to live a life that's transparent and just be forthcoming with your struggles and your habits and your hang-ups and what you need help with. And for fathers and mothers to have abundant grace, to be there and to help them maneuver and work through life and how to get through it. Because, sorry, we're really at a crossroads right now in today's age of how fast it's coming at kids, and you could get everything at the tip of your fingers now, and just how do we bring them back and how do we be there? I think as now I have two young boys to think about, just like how do I tell them my story and help them not to step on the steps I stepped on, but to step on solid ground. So, yeah, I think lots of grace and try to be as transparent as you can.
Wow, that was so good. Let's give them both a hand. You guys can go ahead and step down. Why don't you stand? I just want to say a couple things to wrap up, and then Russell, you can... Where's he at? He's there behind. Okay, come on out here. I'm just going to say a couple things real quick, and then you lead us in a closing song. But just from a pastor's perspective, man, that was so good. As I said, we talked about some of those things, but thank you again for sharing lots of encouragement. But I wanted to say, from a pastor's perspective, just remember how well the enemy does know us. And I'm not saying this to be afraid of him, because we've already covered this a few weeks ago, and we'll come back to it again, I'm sure, in another couple weeks. The greater is he that is in us. But we also have to understand how well he knows us. He knows what the enemy, he watches for all our vulnerability. I'm just going to, if you look on Facebook, can you sometimes see vulnerability expressed in imagery across people's pages? I mean, I think you can. The things that are attraction to people sometimes, they speak to our vulnerability. He also knows what brings us joy. The enemy knows not only what is our point of tripping up, he also knows what excites us. And if he can kind of, again, that distortion, because God brings us joy. But if the enemy can give us a cheap knockoff, he'll try to find a way to get that in front of us and draw us into that cheap knockoff of what God brings us. And he plots, and he's watching, and he's waiting. And what you heard today, like I said, is one family's story. Identify with what you can identify with. It's not identical, but do. And then I just challenge you to have a conversation, begin a conversation with Jesus. Or as TR said, begin a conversation with Jesus that's transparent and open, or with someone else who you know represents him in some capacity. And transparency is the foundation that you begin that in order to move through. And man, I'm saying this to myself as much as I'm saying that to you today. So Russell, why don't you come and lead us and then pray for us, and we'll be dismissed today.